everyone, I'm Antonia Lofaso. Welcome to my kitchen. I'm so excited for this cook along. Today we're going to be making Lobster Fra Diavolo as part of the Feast of Seven Fishes. It's an Italian-American tradition served on Christmas Eve, and it's an entire meal based solely, not always solely, but a lot of fish dishes. Today, Lobster Fra Diavolo basically translates to brother devil, the devil of my brother. I do have two brothers. This is a dish that is made every Christmas Eve in my family. A couple of housekeeping tips before we start. I would like to have all of the vegetables washed and ready to go. So your carrots, your fennel, your celery, your sunchokes, your artichokes, just make sure they're nice and clean. You also want to have a pot of water on so that you can blanch 2 lobster tails or a pound of lobster tails. And you want to have an ice bath ready to go so that when those lobsters are done blanching, you can put them right into some ice so they stop cooking. This one is meant for maybe a little bit more of an intimate Christmas Eve party, anywhere between 4 and 8 people, depending on how courageous you feel. But I really feel like this is one of those intimate recipes that take a good amount of time, and really, it's a huge labor of love, and I think it's so worth it at the end, okay? So everyone take a deep breath. We're in this together, don't worry. All right, let's start with our lobster. So I'm gonna go with lobster tails. This is the season we are splurging, okay? This recipe actually has 3 seafood in it. It has lobster tails, it has cockles, and it has a black cod. So we're getting 3 of the 7 fish just in this one dish. But it's a good amount of work, so we're getting ready to go. So lobster in the shell, we're gonna use the shell to make our broth, okay? We're gonna make our broth from scratch. It's gonna be quick, it's gonna be easy. Don't worry, it's not like a 4-hour broth. I'm gonna show you a little bit of a shortcut. So the lobster is gonna, we're gonna blanch this about half of the way, so the meat will still be raw, but we need this shell so that we can start our broth. So you have that pot of water boiling, and we're just gonna throw those lobsters into the pot of water. So we're gonna just throw those lobsters right into some boiling water. And then I have my ice bath ready to go. And we'll pull them out and let them sit in ice so they stop cooking. The shell is more manageable because it's cooler. Then I'm gonna take my Dutch oven, and this is where we're gonna start making our broth. I'm gonna heat the pan up so it's nice and hot and ready to go, and we're gonna just start cutting our mirepoix, our carrot, celery, and onion. We're just gonna be making a little bit, so I'm gonna take 2 ribs of celery, some carrot, just 1 carrot because it's a little bit of sugar, onion, garlic, and fennel. And again, we already pre-washed this, so we don't have to worry about that. And the carrots, as long as they're scrubbed and they're clean, and these are organic carrots, I'm not gonna peel them. We're gonna strain the entire sauce. So for me, it's not really necessary to take the extra step. So I'm just gonna cut the carrot. I'm gonna cut the celery into large chunks. This is gonna cook for about 30 minutes. So as long as these chunks are kind of the same size, that's kind of really all we need. So I've got 1 carrot cut, some celery, some onion. And that lobster is only gonna blanch for about 1 to 2 minutes, and we're gonna pull it right out because we don't want it to overcook. I'm just doing a quick little multitask right here, and I'm organizing some of my onion and my mirepoix while that lobster is cooking. Okay, it looks good. I'm ready to pull it out. And how I tell is just the shell got nice and red, and that's what we wanna see. And we just wanna cook it enough so that the lobster pulls away from the shell and that we're not really fighting with it, okay? So now that lobster is just gonna sit in this ice bath for a second. I'm gonna get rid of my pot so that I have more space on my counter to cook. So it's really important during these longer recipes that you make space, and when you're no longer using a pot or a pan, you remove it, you put it into the sink. Sometimes I'll even go ahead and like wash that pot out and put it away and really take my time through the dish and clean as I go and organize as I go so it doesn't feel overwhelming. So the lobster's in the ice, just resting. We're gonna use it in a second. And again, I'm just doing a rough cut to carrot, celery, and onion, and some fennel. The fennel's gonna add a beautiful licorice flavor to our broth, right? That anise, that star anise, that fennel flavor, it just has that extra little flavoring, so great in seafood dishes. So we'll take a half a fennel bulb, and I'm gonna reserve the fennel frond because we're actually gonna garnish the whole dish with it later. So don't throw any of that stuff away, just kind of leave it off to the side because you'll see what we're gonna do with it later. So I've got the carrot, celery, onion, fennel, and I'm just gonna heat my Dutch oven so that the oil just starts to shimmer a little bit. If you see a little smoke, that's fine. And we're gonna just start caramelizing all of that mirepoix inside of my Dutch oven. And you just wanna let it crackle, and you just wanna let it go, okay? Now, we've got the lobster. I'm gonna turn it over, let it get nice and cool. All the rest of the ingredients that you need for this broth, okay, the shortcut is that we're gonna use a lobster base. And there's a great product out there that I love, that it's in a jar, it's a lobster base, and it's got that strong, intense lobster flavor that's really gonna bring this broth together a little bit faster than it would if we were making a traditional, like, restaurant-style lobster broth. If I was doing that, I would have had raw lobster shells, raw shrimp shells. I would roast them in the oven until they got really nice and crisp and dark, and then start a broth that way, let it simmer, and that takes a little bit longer. So this is just kind of a quick cheat, but that being said, you're really making this broth. We're using the shells, you're using mirepoix. We're just helping along that development of flavor to go faster with a little bit of the base. So those are my lobsters cooling. I'm gonna pull them out of the water. I'm gonna leave them on their back so that the belly is exposed, and that's how we're gonna pull the meat out. So I have a bowl here because once the lobster meat comes out, I'm gonna reserve it so we can use it later, because we just want the shells right now, so we can put those shells into our pan. So the lobster's on its back to expose the belly, and this is how we're gonna cut through. Now, lobster moves, there is no flat base, so we need to be careful, and you need to make sure your knife is sharp, because we're gonna pierce the belly in the center, press down, flip it around, and do the same, and then pop it open. I'll show you. Ready? So just kind of hold on. You wanna make sure that your knife has penetrated the belly, and then go down, and then crack down all the way through. If you don't crack the other end of the shell, that's okay. You don't really need to. You just need to get to the belly and down. Same on this side, okay? Once that's out, 2 hands. Now, all of these edges of the lobster tend to be a little sharp. I've gotten cut by them a couple of times. If you feel like it's too sharp and your hands hurt like that, that's okay. I'm gonna show you a trick. Put the whole lobster in a towel that you don't love, okay? Because this towel now is gonna get a ton of lobster juice on it, or maybe it just becomes your lobster juice towel, we don't know, okay? And you're gonna cradle the lobster tail in between your towel, and then you can break it open, and you feel a little bit stronger about it because that towel is protecting your hands, okay? We don't want you to hurt yourself while you're doing that. And then all you need to do, and you'll feel a little opening in there, you're gonna remove the lobster from the shell. Okay? And because it's not cooked all the way, that's okay. You're gonna feel it. It's gonna come out just like that. Okay? May need a little bit more help because it's still nice and raw. And we're gonna chop this lobster, and it's gonna be part of the entire dish of Fra Diavolo. So don't worry too much if the pieces start to break off. That's okay. The important thing is that the lobster is not overcooked, because we're gonna chop that anyway. So now we got the shell, right? We're gonna throw those shells right into our broth. I will show you the next one again. So again, knife, holding lobster tail tight, down, then the other side, right where the other pierce was, and down. Gonna go right into my now lobster towel. Open it up. Just like that. Pull the meat out, and then lobster goes inside, or lobster shell goes inside of your broth stock pot. So again, this is one of those recipes where we are using our hands, we are pulling meat out, we are going to, it's gonna look great. And again, the lobster, that's okay if it starts to break apart because we are going to cut this lobster into chunks. The more important part is that the lobster is not overcooked, which it's not. I'm gonna throw that into the pot and now let those lobster shells roast with that carrot, celery, onion, and fennel. Okay, now we have all of these lobsters. You wanna make sure there's no shell on the outside. If you see any pieces of shell, just throw that right into your pot. If you see any sort of like discolored pieces that you don't think look great, that's okay, just pull those off. And then you're gonna cut the lobster in about, I don't know, I would say like a 1/2 inch chunks, okay? We don't want it to be too small. We want larger pieces of lobster, something that you would fit on a fork and take in one bite. I always think about that sometimes when I'm cutting pieces that are meant to be eaten in one bite. You know, if I was eating this, I don't wanna struggle with it. How do we cut it? Sometimes if you're making a soup and you're looking at your vegetables, I was like, I want all of this to fit on one spoon. So as I cut the lobster, I think of the same thing. Like, let's make sure there's any kind of intestines, we kind of just pull that out, anything that's discolored. And again, we just kind of cut the lobster into beautiful chunks, not too small because we still want to recognize that it's lobster. Okay? Now, I'm not going to throw that away. All of those discarded things go right into my broth, right, to season that broth. So we've got lobster ready to go. I'm going to put that with the cod and cockles, and we'll come back to it later. So again, you just want to make sure that you take away any equipment that you don't need anymore, right? We don't need the ice bath. We don't need the pot and pan for the lobster. And I want to clean my cutting board and just make sure now that we're starting on something new, that we're organized and cleaned and ready to go. So this broth is already starting to smell so delicious, right? There's still a ton of fat in there to roast those lobster shells. You're starting to see a good color on the carrot and the onion and the celery. We want that caramelization, okay? I'm gonna pull out a little garlic clove. I don't add garlic in the beginning to any kind of sauce or broth that I'm making, and that's because it tends to darken quicker because it's a smaller piece, but at the same time, and I don't want any of that bitter garlic flavor because the carrot, the celery, the onion, the fennel take a little bit longer to develop. So I let them get a head start, and garlic goes in when the herbs go in. So we're gonna just kind of smash some cloves of garlic. Just like that. We have some garlic ready to go. And we're gonna bloom garlic with herbs, okay? So I've got a ton of herbs right here, and this is an herby sauce, right? You're gonna go to the supermarket and you're gonna say, oh my God, I'm buying like all of these herbs. That's okay. We're gonna use all of them. We're gonna do a nice, beautiful sprig of basil, about 2 sprigs of tarragon, some thyme, rosemary, bay leaf. This is a fresh bay leaf. Feel free to use a dry one. That's okay too. And the cloves of garlic right into that pot. I'm gonna add some chili flake as well. Now remember, the title of this, Fra Diavolo, Brother's Devil, a spicy tomato seafoody broth dish, okay? So as much spice as you want, I'm ready for. I add a good amount of chili flake because I like it spicy. So we're gonna let those herbs start to bloom. The bay leaf, the thyme, tarragon, basil, rosemary, all of that's gonna just start to hit the heat. Really, really important to let those herbs hit fat so that they open up and you can really get the true essence, okay? We're gonna throw some butter in there. The butter at this point is actually gonna start to caramelize all of those vegetables because I'm gonna let it get nice and brown, and all of those lobster shells, it's gonna get nice and brown, okay? Once that butter starts to melt, we'll add all of our liquid. We're gonna do tomato paste, lobster base, bourbon, and white wine, okay? So as that's in there roasting, we are going to start on the artichokes, okay? Artichokes. We have sunchokes and baby artichokes. First off, it's the perfect season for it. Perfect season. Love artichokes. So we've got baby artichokes that we're gonna clean and fry, and then we have sunchokes, otherwise known as a Jerusalem artichoke. So you already clean these, so we're just gonna peel them and boil them in cream and make a puree. The sunchokes have this beautiful artichoke flavor, but they're super starchy and very creamy and perfect for, you know, the root vegetable style to this dish. That being said, I love sort of the dual artichoke flavor that we're gonna have here. There's an echo, right? There's gonna be this beautiful sunchoke puree and then this crispy artichoke. So you're getting these sort of flavors bounced back to you in two different applications. So again, multitasking, coming over here, checking in on our lobster broth. And look, you can see under here, look at all those beautiful vegetables, caramelized, all that chili flake, all of those herbs. Okay, so we're gonna start to peel these sunchokes and get them boiling in cream while we have the lobster stock going. Now there's all these little bulbs on the sunchoke. You can pull them off with your knife first, but if you have a really sharp peeler, they'll just kind of come off. So, but just be careful because as you do that, it's easy for the peeler to kind of catch you. So you might want to just go a little bit slower when it comes to peeling the sunchokes. Just like that. And we're not going to put the sunchokes in any kind of water so that they don't start to oxidize because we're going to cook them right away. And the sunchoke actually doesn't have the same oxidation properties as the artichoke. They can live unpeeled for a second without discoloring, whereas the baby artichokes, as soon as we start peeling those, you're gonna see they really need to go into a bowl with water right away because otherwise they will start to discolor. We're just gonna peel these down. Now, sunchokes really only come around in the fall and in the winter. So we really wanna enjoy the sunchoke and the artichoke in the season that they're meant for because they do make a difference. And if you're looking for sunchokes and baby artichokes in the supermarket, listen, this time of year, I always like to say, please spend time with your produce manager in your supermarket. Maybe bring them a present. Your fishmonger, your butcher, the same purveyors that sell to restaurants sell to supermarkets. So if you go in there with your special requests, and always like to give them a good amount of time. You know, my mom used to make her Feast of the Seven Fishes menu, I don't know, like 6 weeks in advance. So when you know what you want to make, go to your local supermarket. If there's specialty ingredients, if you let them know with enough time in advance, they should be able to help you out. Sometimes you just need to ask and you need to make friends. Okay. Peel, peel, peel. Now, if there's a little bit of skin every once in a while, that's okay. It's not the worst thing. I actually roast sunchokes with the skin on. The skin is totally edible and delicious. But in this application, because we're boiling it in cream and pureeing it, I don't want the skin on it. But if there's little flecks of skin, that's not gonna hurt anybody. Okay, so you can see how we're gonna go back because we're multitasking through this whole recipe, how all of those vegetables are so beautifully caramelized, as are the lobster shells. And now we're gonna start adding, in this order, some tomato paste. And you guys have all the measurements. I'm the professional here, so I'm just gonna eyeball it. Say, I have the tomato paste goes in first, and the tomato paste needs to bloom. So the tomato paste goes in first because I want it to hit the heat, I want it to hit the fat, and really open up its flavors before I start adding the liquid, okay? In we go, in we go. Now we're gonna go bourbon and white wine. Lots of bourbon, love bourbon. Good amount of white wine. Gonna let that cook for a second, and then we're gonna just add some water, okay? You can absolutely use a chicken stock if you want to. I actually just prefer water because there's so much great flavor in there already. And honestly, I wanna keep it seafood, okay? So as soon as that reduces a little bit, then I'm gonna add the lobster base, a little bit of water, and then we have our broth simmering, ready to go, and it's gonna meet us at the very end of the recipe. I have to say probably the sunchoke is a root that makes you work for its love, right? Really makes you work for its love because these are not easy to peel. But they're so, so worth it. I think they're such a special puree. You know, it's this, you know, it's in the artichoke family, but it's starchier and it's creamier. This one's a little strangely, so I'm gonna not fight with it and just peel it like that. It's okay if you see a little bit of that red. It's just a stain from the skin. Peel it all the way around, and we're gonna get these boiling in some cream. Okay. Keep your peeler. You're gonna need that for the baby artichokes. Again, let's clean our station, get rid of all the peels. I'm gonna give this a little taste. That bourbon, that wine is still doing its job and it's cooking out. It's gonna keep going. We're gonna add a little bit of that lobster base now. And this is our cheat. This is what cheats it and gives us that roasted seafood shell flavor. So instead of spending a ton of time roasting all of those shrimp shells or crab shells and lobster shells to make a true seafood broth, this is a great product. Use it. It gives you saves you just a little bit of time. So that base just went in there. We're gonna add water, but at first we wanna let a little bit of that wine and bourbon continue to cook out on its own, and then we're gonna go ahead and add some water, let it simmer, and we're almost there. Okay, sunchoke puree, pot, my sunchokes. Now, they're already strangely shaped, right? So you kind of just want to get them big enough so that they boil in cream and that they boil in cream evenly. So however that is to you, because these are so strangely shaped, just cut them so that they are even chunks that can be boiled and pureed. And again, totally fine if there are little flecks of the skin. We're gonna puree. It's not gonna make a big difference. When I roast these, I actually roast them with the skin on and eat them with the skin on. There, we're gonna do some salt and just some heavy whipping cream. We're gonna let these simmer, and then we're gonna puree. And you just want enough cream so that it covers the top, because we're gonna simmer this, we're not gonna boil it. We're gonna simmer it on a low to medium heat because we also don't want it to boil over, and we also don't want the bottom to scald. So salt, cream, sunchokes, that's it, on a back burner, and just let it go. Let's check back in with our stock, see how the wine and broth is going. So good. It is now ready for some water. Let's just use this bowl real quick and throw some water into our stock. And just enough water to barely cover what's inside the pot. And this water is going to start to evaporate, but not before it has an opportunity to really season all of that liquid in there. And as it starts to evaporate and come down a little bit, the flavor is going to concentrate. It's going to be delicious. Time for the baby artichokes. Whoop, try to get away. Baby artichoke time. You're going to take a lemon, just kind of rub it, cut it open, squeeze. Doesn't need to be a ton. This is just to prevent oxidation. Keep one whole half lemon inside, add some water. So as we cut, squeezed both sides of the lemon, just kept one side. And as we cut the artichokes and clean the artichokes, we're gonna throw them into the water so that they don't oxidize. Okay, so baby artichoke. Most of this, unfortunately, is inedible. But the best part of the baby artichoke is the entire center, and the heart is edible. So I'm just gonna cut off the top. Oh, and actually, you know what? We're gonna use a serrated knife. Dun, 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 dun. Serrated knife when it comes to cutting artichokes because the leaves are strong. I have to say, Jerusalem artichokes are strong. Our baby artichokes are strong. So serrated knife, and you wanna cut the top down, and then you just kinda wanna peel the outside off. We can't really eat any of these leaves. They're a little too rough. And then we're just gonna take the peeler at the very, very end and just take off any pieces that we don't need. I love the stem, but we really need to pay attention to how far the stem goes down and how fibrous it is. So you can kind of see the fibers as I peel, and I just peel to where I don't really see the fibers come anymore, just like that, right? Maybe take a little bit more off the top, just like that. And then we're going to quarter the artichoke, like so, into the water, okay? So all we need for this, serrated knife, peeler, and let's do this a little more organized, Antonia. Clean artichokes here, artichoke debris here, right? So we're gonna go serrated knife right down. Then we're gonna peel all of the artichoke we don't need, right? And you wanna peel down to where you see that it's like kind of yellow, yellowish green, a little bit of greens, not too awful, but the more yellow, that's the more tender, okay? Then you wanna just take your peeler, again, kind of come all the way up, so if there's any debris up at the top of the stem, feel free to peel it off, and then peel onto the stem, just like that. And then we will, again, quarter into the water. So I told you that this recipe was gonna be a labor of love, right? So to make it go quicker, this is what we do in the restaurant. We peel all of them with the serrated, right? So that we don't need to go near the knife again until later. That's just a little like quick prep technique. Kind of do all of them like that. And we'll go back and peel them all. It's kind of like one thing at a time for all. So we're not picking up our utensils over and over again, because that actually slows us down. So it's just kind of a quick prep tip, if you will. So we're peeling the artichoke again to where you don't really see any of that green. We just see that bright yellow. And I know it seems like a lot of the artichoke is wasted, and unfortunately it is, but that's just really what we deal with when we eat artichokes. You know, unless you're eating the large ones whole and you're eating all of the leaves, but the baby ones aren't really meant for that. The baby ones are really meant because you can eat the whole center, the heart, and I always think the heart of the artichoke is the sweetest. Okay, we just got a couple more. All of that stem is off. Sometimes these baby artichokes have really long, beautiful stems, and they're totally edible. It's usually as the season goes on. Okay, so let's cut these, get them in water. We'll clean our station, and then we will fry. So we got sunchokes going, we got the broth going, we've got artichokes gonna start to fry, and then we will get into the actual meat and bones of this dish, which is the seafood. We're gonna get ready to clean our cod, and we're gonna get ready to wash our cockles. Okay, so artichokes in the garbage, clean up our station. We can get rid of the peeler. We no longer need our peeler. We're gonna check our broth and see how that's doing. Okay, let's taste this broth. Oh my goodness, it looks perfect. It looks beautiful. Yes, 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 yes. Okay, so we're gonna get ready to fry. Now remember, the only reason that I have these in water is so that they don't discolor. So I'm gonna just let them drain on water because we're gonna fry them all together now. I'm gonna use a tabletop electric fryer. I love these fryers. I think that they're super inexpensive, and if you have space in your kitchen to use them, do. It always regulates the temperature. You never have to worry about turning it up, turning it on the burner so that it regulates, and having a oil thermometer in there. It does it for you, and you can always put a top on it. And I sometimes move mine outside in case there's a little bit of a smell. But we're gonna just fry these very gently. Put one at a time because they were in water. I just want them to be careful and not get them not get that water spraying up at me. So very, very gently dropping them in there. I'm gonna let them fall on some paper towels. As soon as they come out of the fryer, we're gonna season them immediately with some salt. And then we're gonna just let them reserve. And you'll see, we don't need to reheat them. These are just kind of these beautiful flecks of fried artichoke garnish that are gonna go on our finished product. Okay, those artichokes are frying. So clams, cockles, manila clams, little neck clams. I would just say, if you can't find cockles, that's okay. Manila clams would be my next favorite, and really any kind of small plump clam will work for this dish, okay? But again, talk to your fishmonger and get what you want in the moment. Let me make sure that these are ready to come out. So just until they're a beautiful golden brown, and artichokes have this kind of beautiful nutty flavor on their own. It's like this gorgeous sprouting flower. So these are gonna come out, and we're just gonna season them with a little bit of salt. Great. So a little bit of salt over the top. That's when they can really absorb the salt, is as soon as they're out of their fryer, they're still a little wet with oil. Let's try one. Woo! So good. The leaves are nice and tender. There's that beautiful kind of creaminess to the artichoke. But more importantly, it's that beautiful kind of iron flavor, right? It tastes like the earth in such a great way. Okay, so you want to make sure that the clams or the cockles are already cleaned. And by cleaned, you want to ask your fishmonger or the supermarket, wherever you bought them, if they've been cleaned. And that's really, they put them in buckets of water. They let them sort of rub up against each other, a flow of streaming water to kind of make sure that fresh water is kind of always being put on them so that they can release all their little sand particles. And what I like to do too, even though they've been cleaned, throw a little bit of salt on them, move them around in water, so really make sure that they're extra clean so we don't get any kind of grains or sand grains into our dish. So I would normally do this in the sink, but it's just so that you can see, just a little bit of water and some salt. And I'm just kind of moving the clam, the cockle, inside the water. I'm checking to see if there's any damaged ones, right? So if you see any that are broken or if there's a part of the shell that's chipped, we're throwing those away immediately, okay? If you see any of them that are open, that's okay. Sort of start to press on it a little bit. If it closes, that means it's still alive and we can keep going. If it doesn't close, it means we need to throw them away, okay? Also, this is something where like you can clean these a day, 2, maybe even 3 days in advance. Put them in a perforated bowl or maybe just a regular bowl inside of your refrigerator. Couple of ice cubes, a wet paper towel so they stay nice and cold. You do not want to keep clams inside of water inside of your refrigerator. They will die that way, okay? And we want the clams to be alive. So just change the ice every day, change the paper towel every day, and they'll live in your refrigerator for a couple of days, and the cleaning process can be done early so that you can just cook it when you need it. So we have the cockles that are cleaned and ready to go. We've got lobster that's par cooked and chopped and ready to go. We're gonna get down to the nitty gritty, and that is our black cod. Let's taste this. Perfect, spicy. So much great lobster flavor. So you can see the cream is starting to come to a boil. I don't want it to boil over, so I'm just gonna give it a little bit of a stir. And when you see cream kind of make that cloud balloon, if you will, because it's gotten so hot, it just needs a little bit of air. So if you take your spoon and just gently pop those little air bubbles of cream, it should go back down to a simmer. But normally when cream boils over, it's this sort of air cloud pocket that happens. And if you just kind of poke it with a spoon, it should go down to simmering again. And now we are going to cut our cod. Now, if you can't find lingcod or your fishmonger can't get you black cod, that's okay. Find out what kind of cod they can get you. A lingcod would be great as well. I really like black cod though because it is so succulent and luscious and has a high fat content. And the other part is it's an extremely forgiving fish. So there's a lot of different cooking processes that are happening today. So this fish has to be cooked ever so slightly, and then it has this great carryover quality, and then it just kind of flakes away. So it's kind of really hard to mess this fish up because it's just so beautifully fatty. So we're gonna take the skin off of it. I'm gonna show you how to take the skin off it. Now, I personally think that if you can purchase this bone out, so they've removed all that sort of pin bone that goes down the center, and that skin off, it's gonna save you some time, but I'm gonna show you how to do it in case it comes to you like this. So I'm gonna take the skin off first, and the way I do that, I go to sort of the tail end piece, okay? And you're going to use a very sharp filleting knife, fish filleting knife. Now, I can use my chef's knife as long as it's sharp enough, but because I have a fish filleting knife, I'm gonna use this, okay? And you just kind of wanna start at the tail of the fish and get to where the skin is. And then once you're there, you're gonna basically just pull with your hand, your left hand that you're holding on, or your right hand, whatever it is, but whatever hand's holding onto the tail of the fish, that's the base, and I'm just gonna pull as I slide my knife at the bottom, and that's gonna pull the skin off just like that. Ta-da! We got the end, just peel that off. And that is the skin, and that we don't need. Now you have your fillet of fish. You see I got all of that back off. And now we just have a beautiful filleted fish. Now there's a pin bone that goes down the center. And we're just gonna cut along that because we just want these little fillets here, okay? So I'm just gonna take my knife to where those bones start, bring my knife down to the very end. And really when you're cutting fish, you want it in one fell swoop. We don't want to saw back and forth. The sawing motion, the back and forth sawing motion, unfortunately starts to rip the skin and the flesh of the fish, and we don't want that. So if we have to go back, we can go back again, that's fine, but again, in one fell swoop. Okay? So now this is the side of the cod that I'm gonna use. And we will use the other side to this, but not today, okay? Because basically I would then pull the bone from here and remove all of that center bone. This is basically all center bone here. So we have a thinner side here, which we can absolutely use as well. They're just a little bit smaller, and that's okay. Okay, so 1 and 2. I'm gonna cut these into little fillets. This is what we're gonna cook today. This is what we're gonna save for later. Okay, so now we have our cockles. We have our cod. We have our lobster. And we're ready to go. I'm gonna give my cutting board a little clean. Okay, so cod, lobster, cockles, and we will get ready to make this whole meal come together. So now we're gonna strain the lobster broth. So you wanna get just sort of like a medium pot and a fine mesh strainer. Okay, so that seafood broth is ready to come off. The lobster broth has been strained and ready to go. The sunchokes are still simmering in cream, and we're gonna boil those. And we're gonna get ready to sear the cod. So I have a little cast iron here. Stainless steel, if you have a non-stick, that's fine. Of those three, it's fine. We're gonna do a little bit of oil. And then I'm gonna season the cod with just a little bit of salt and a little bit of pepper. I'm gonna do both sides, but I'm being a little scarce with the salt, okay? We're gonna be using clams, cockles, they tend to be salty, so I just wanna make sure that we control the salinity on things that we can, okay? So just a little bit of salt and pepper on both sides. So I've had people ask me before when I'm teaching them to cook, they're like, okay, I'm gonna season the fish. Do you season both sides? And then my answer to them is always like, well, do you eat both sides? So if you eat both sides, you season both sides, okay? So we're gonna start inside of the pan, cast iron. We're gonna let the oil just shimmer, and we want a little bit of color on the outside of the cod. Now, we're gonna sear the cod presentation side down. When I say presentation side, it means the side that's gonna be up for everyone to see. And there's a bloodline that goes down the back, totally edible, but it's a little bit more pink on one side. And that is the side that's actually gonna be facing us, okay? And that's okay, it looks strange, but we wanna sear presentation side down first, okay? I am not going to move this cod at all, okay? I want it to sear perfectly. So if I start to mess with it and touch it too much, it's not gonna happen, okay? So I'm gonna allow that crust to form. Don't get scared, it's a hot pan, but we don't wanna move the fish. That's how the fish is gonna start to break, okay? And this is a very fatty, translucent fish. So as soon as it starts to cook and you start touching it too much, it's gonna start breaking apart. I do like to move the oil around the pan so that we really make sure that all parts of the fish are touching some oil. I have a little bit of thyme here, so I'm gonna just throw some thyme into that pan because why not, right? Get a little bit of flavor into that oil. Throw some butter into that pan as well. We're gonna let that brown. And then we're gonna baste the fish with all of that butter. And essentially, we're really just gonna cook this fish just on one side, flip it over, and then I said that carryover cooking is really gonna go into play then. So we want the fish to brown. That is the objective here. We want the pan to get nice and hot. I do have a fish spatula on standby so we can flip that fish when it's ready. And I have a plate ready to go so we can put that fish onto the plate with all the butter. And that way we're just using one pan, right? I don't have a ton of pans. We're gonna reuse this pan again to cook the cockles and to finish cooking the lobster. So I'm gonna just, now that the butter is getting nice and brown, I'm gonna pull it into one corner and just kind of baste over the top the raw side of the fish, okay? This is the side that can really accept butter because it's raw, so it's gonna accept all that nutty brown butter that goes over the top. So now we've got all that cod. We're gonna save that butter too. Cod is great. We're gonna throw those clams now into the same pan. And add a little bit of butter. Just gonna let those clams saute. I'm gonna let them open up. And while those clams are opening up and a little bit of butter, we're gonna help it along with all of that broth that we just made, all of that great lobster broth. We're gonna puree our sunchokes. So the clams are opening beautifully. We're gonna pull all those clams out. All of our cooked fish is gonna go on one plate and get ready to plate. So just with a slotted spoon, because we wanna leave all of that juice inside. We just wanna pull these clams out. We wanna keep all that great broth. We're gonna add that broth to our seafood broth that's already made. So all of this great clam jus, that beautiful natural salinity, that ocean flavor is gonna come out. There we go. Look at that. Oops, so if you ever see this, broken clam, we don't want it. Clams, cod, hot and cooked and ready to go. So now, the same pan, once again, we've got clam jus, butter. We're gonna add the rest of that lobster and just slowly cook that lobster right into that butter. And that's gonna cook the rest of the way. Oh, so delicious. We're gonna leave that off to the side and get ready to plate. The last thing we need to do is our sunchoke puree. You can see that in there. And I just want the chokes, and we'll add cream as we need it. It's almost just like boiling potatoes, if you will. I've made fennel puree the same kind of way, where you kind of just cube the fennel, put cream and salt, do the same kind of thing. Celery root puree, same kind of thing. I've made a beautiful carrot puree, same way. Rutabaga is incredible, the same. But I have to say, the sunchokes, they are my favorite. Okay, so we're gonna reserve the cream as we need it, but essentially you want it the same texture as baby food. I just think that's the easiest way to explain it, and everyone knows what the texture of baby food looks like. So because this is a hot product, I wanna make sure that the blender has air, or the steam can escape through the top. So I'm gonna take the top off the blender, but I am gonna cover it with my towel, and I'm gonna put it on low, because I want this to start very, very softly. I just add my cream as I need it. I want the texture, it's like baby food. Perfect. We are ready to plate. So all of the beautiful fennel that we used in that broth, these are the fennel fronds. I think this is incredible, incredible herb that I love to use. I think there's a duality to fennel, and that if you throw this part away, you're missing some of the best part. So we're gonna use that to garnish, along with just some fresh parsley. So I'll have those waiting, and we can start. So I like to serve this dish in a bowl, but sort of a flat bowl so that there's a lot of surface space, but then just enough so it can really hold the broth. And I like to serve the broth on the side. So I'm gonna take a little bit of that puree, and I'm just gonna spoon it at the bottom of the plate. And this is what the cod is gonna sit on, okay? So gentle. And then you have a piece of your cod, right? The cod just sits right in the center there. And then you take your clams and you just kind of put them, nestle them, I like to say, right next to the cod. Go all the way around, right? Now, all of this beautiful butter and broth that came off that fish, I'm gonna actually pour right into my lobster stock. So none of this goes to waste. Oh, we'll grab that guy out of there. We're gonna turn the broth on so it gets nice and hot. Then I have all of that lobster, right, that you've seen from the beginning. We're gonna just nestle lobster throughout. Lobster, cod, the cockles, the sunchoke puree. Such a beautiful dish. And that broth too, all of that butter lobster broth, that's gonna go into the stock as well, right? Nothing is left behind. We're just gonna heat that broth and finish it with a little bit of butter. So that broth is heating. We're gonna add just a little nugget of butter to that broth. We're gonna whisk it together. Bring that to a boil. So as this is here plated, now remember, it's okay if it gets a little room temperature because the broth is the hot part of this dish. And once that broth is hot and you pour it over the top, it's gonna bring everything back to a temperature that you wanna eat it at, okay? So we're gonna just take these fennel fronds and we're gonna just put them all very delicately around. No stem with this, it's a little too aggressive. Just the little hairs of fennel. Looks so beautiful just like that. And once that hot broth hits this, oh my goodness, it's gonna just melt in there and just reinforce that tarragon flavor from the broth, the fennel flavor from the broth. And we're gonna do parsley leaves just over the top, just like that. Then we go to our artichokes. We've got artichokes that we just kind of place around. Every part of this dish was an incredible labor of love. And then you have this very intense lobster spicy Fra Diavolo sauce that at the very, very end, you just whisk some cold butter into to make it extra creamy. And then you pour it into like a little side sauce, okay? So as soon as that's ready, I'm gonna show you, and you pour it over the top and it's ready to go. See the hot steam coming off the pot? That is the broth you're gonna pour over this, and it's gonna bring everything back up to temperature, and it's gonna be delicious. And then we have the Fra Diavolo sauce right here, just to pour over the top right before you get ready to eat it. It smells so good, but more importantly, it just looks so beautiful. You can really tell that this is the kind of dish that took so much time, so much patience, and so much courage, because it was a long dish. But I promise you it pays off because the broth, the lobster, oh my God, my mouth is already watering. Wow. Sometimes the first word is just wow. The beautiful seafood flavor between the lobster and the cod and the cockles. There's like this ocean, salty, creamy, so many different textures between sort of that succulent cod, those plump cockles, and the lobster is just so buttery. That coupled with the sunchoke puree that has this kind of beautiful artichoke earth flavor that then mixes in with that super intense broth of seafood and fennel. And then all of a sudden you bite into this crisp artichoke and there's so many great textures as these beautiful herbs start to get water, as these beautiful herbs start to hit the heat, they melt, but they're so fresh at the same time. Someone needs to take this away from me. I will legitimately eat the whole thing. So good.